VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We are on, my goodness, April 25th, about 2.5 days away from the 2023 NFL Draft. We are down to brass tacks, and the Vikings will add at least 5 new players to the roster, trying to stave off a regression, which everybody seems to forecast. They had a glorious 13-4 record, but had an underwater point differential, and nobody really believed in them. And then they kind of exposed themselves as frauds at home against the Giants. They kind of came to fruition. So, to not regress totally, back to 8 and 9 in that sinful nature of Vikings football, they're going to have to nail this draft class. And whether that's a quarterback, trading up, staying put, trading back, I want to get into what I think is the prognosis for this year's draft. Now, this is my moment to prove to you guys and gals that I'm not a quack. Last year, I did the same show. I had 5 predictions. I had them on video with you all, and then I had them in writing at VikingsTerritory.com. So I'm going to pound my chest or do the LeBron celebration for real brief so you can kind of know what I'm talking about here. All right, last year heading into the draft, my 5 predictions were, in phrases here. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah chooses a defensive back with his first pick. Lewis Cine was the guy. Check. Multiple trades will occur during the event, and Adofo-Mensah will be like a kid in a candy store. Check. He traded more than anybody else in the NFL during the draft. Number 3 was the draft, the event, will be defensively themed. Check. The Vikings had 5 of their first 6 picks were defenders last year. Number 4 is where I had to get a little iffy. Cousins gets at least one more notable playmaker. He got Ty Chandler and Jalen Naylor, so that one's a little flimsy, forgive me. But number 5 would be that there were no quarterbacks chosen because they had Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion on the roster. Check. No quarterbacks came off the board last year. So that was 2022. You're not dealing with a weirdo here. Here is 2023. 7 predictions in no particular order. Number 1 is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah trades out of the 23rd pick, down perhaps even into round 2, which would probably piss a lot of people off, but it is what it is. I think that his primary goal will be stacking draft capital in the draft sweet spot, which is allegedly pick number 20 through 100. So I believe the value of ace general manager will accrue value during the draft and have more lottery tickets to scratch. Now, I know everybody isn't a fan of trading back. If this happens, if I'm correct, this will be 4 straight drafts where the Vikings have traded down from a first-round pick. So I think this is just the way that it is. Of course, Adofo-Mensah said at a press conference 2 weeks ago that he's looking for impact, not necessarily quantity. So if I'm wrong, that'll be the reason. But I do believe, although we have all of the smoke about trading up 20 spots to draft Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, I ultimately don't think that they have the draft capital to make that type of move, and I think it's more likely that they take a flyer on somebody like Hendon Hooker after round 1, or Dorian Thompson-Robinson, or pretty much any quarterback that Kevin O'Connell has looked at and said, I can make that guy work. I was a mid-rounder myself. I'm going to, get some revenge, have some justice, and take a mid-rounder and make him the franchise quarterback. I think that's more likely to come to fruition, but I digress. The first prediction is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will trade out of the 23rd pick, probably to somebody like the Texans, Bengals, Saints, Chiefs, or Eagles. Keep an eye on those teams. Number 2, I did this one yesterday. A defensive lineman will be the first pick, whenever that is. If it's a 23 or 29 or 38, a defensive lineman will be the pick, and I am saying a defensive tackle. I have labeled Brian Bresee as the most likely gentleman to become a Viking, although Maisie Smith from Michigan, Kalijah Cansey from Pittsburgh makes sense. But here's the deal. While Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was in the front office with the 49ers for 8 drafts, in rounds 1 and 2, John Lynch, Kwesi, Kyle Shanahan, I guess Shanahan wasn't there the whole time, but John Lynch and Kwesi, they drafted 6 defensive linemen in rounds 1 and 2. The Vikings haven't drafted any defensive linemen in rounds 1 and 2 since Sharif Floyd in 2013. And if you're talking edge rushers, that goes all the way back to 2005. I believe that based on the way Adofo-Mensah was raised in the NFL, or perhaps how he influenced others to draft, that they need to start building the defensive trenches. They didn't do it last year in the draft. They got Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth. So now I think we see the tide turn where you see kind of a 49ersization of the Vikings, whether that's on defense or on offense. So I predict a defensive lineman, probably a defensive tackle, is the first pick for your Vikings of this event. Number 3, I had to throw this in there. This shouldn't even have to be a prediction. Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter will not be traded during this draft. I still see smoke for it. Like, oh yeah, they can just trade Cousins, get Trey Lance, or Danielle Hunter. He can be used in the trade up to get that number 3 pick from the Cardinals. And I guess if they were really stupid, they could trade one or both of those guys and then figure out how to sign free agents, how to figure out draft class signees later. But I, for the life of me, the general manager that runs these Vikings is a guy with a financial background and everything. Every time he talks, he talks about value. And I don't think that he is going to trade Kirk Cousins and then just sock it to himself with this $28.5 million cap penalty. Now, if they wait until the summer to trade both these guys, then it's not a problem whatsoever. But the Vikings are already cash strapped to the tune of last in the league. I think they have $1.7 million. They're subtracting money from their salary cap. It goes in the red if they trade Cousins and or Hunter. If they wait until June 1st, boom, then it's like a normal trade. You get a bunch of cap savings, eat some dead cap, blah, blah, blah. But unless I'm totally wrong here and they've got some real big trick up their sleeve, I do not see a world where Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter are traded during this draft. It just doesn't make sense by the pennies and the dimes and the nickels. So that's number 3, that Kirk and Danielle are not traded. Number 4 is the Vikings end up with 7 to 10 draft picks. Last year they ended up with a class of 10. I can't remember exactly how many picks they started the draft with. Was it 6 or 7? And they ended up with 10 when the event was all said and done. I think that will happen again. We just had this very weird tendency, blessing, scourge, whichever word you want to use, that between Rick Spielman and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the Vikings have had and have 2 general managers that love to trade on draft day and draft night. It makes it really exciting for my job. Probably makes it exciting for your viewing value and entertainment. But based on the way that he did business last year and only having 5 picks now, I think you just kind of see a domino effect as he trades back and trades back. And when you look up, you're like, good Lord, we got 7 new dudes. I think that will happen. Number 5, I mentioned Hendon Hooker earlier. He's a very popular topic. Thank you, Daniel Jeremiah, March 21st. Had a mock draft on NFL.com that said Hendon Hooker to the Vikings, and that was the first documented point anywhere where Hendon Hooker was a first-round prospect. And right after that, the rest of the world realized, well, hey, Kirk Cousins didn't get an extension. Hendon Hooker seems like something they would do. Let's all get together and mock Hendon Hooker to the Vikings. And I swear to everything holy, there's been about 20 mock drafts with Hendon Hooker to the Vikings since then. Now, do those matter? No. They do not matter one iota. But they make everybody convinced, and in my opinion, hoodwinked into believing that this Hooker at number 23 thing is going to happen. I don't believe it. The value-based general manager side-eyeing a quarterback who was a round 3 prospect 6 weeks ago does not make sense for me. Now, they might love him. That's great. Hopefully, he's the quarterback of the Vikings, but I don't think it happens at the 23rd pick. If they're going to get Hooker, it's going to be after the trade backs that I've mentioned and probably in round 2. So I have no qualms with Hooker being the quarterback of the Vikings. I just don't want a first-round stigma attached to him, because as soon as that happens and he's not any good, that's all we'll be remembered for, is the team that selected the old, injured quarterback, knowing full well he was old and injured. What did you think was going to happen? However, if he's drafted round 2 or 3, nobody cares. Like Kellen Mond, nobody really cared that he didn't work out. It's always that first-round stigma that's how they get you. So I will say that Hooker may join the Vikings, but I can tell you, in my opinion, my prediction, it will not be with the 23rd overall pick. Savage me if I'm wrong. Number 6, winding down the show. A guard or a center will be drafted by your Minnesota Vikings in late rounds. Last year, every time I made the depth chart for, the game afoot on Sunday, I always snickered at how they didn't have many guards. It's like Ed Ingram, Chris Reed, Ezra Cleveland, and then Kyle Hinton if he's ready to go. Like they don't really have many guards. And so I think that it's a safe assumption that when they start getting all these picks I'm talking about, They go draft another guard, probably from a big school because Kwesi seems to enjoy those guys. There's Anthony Bradford from LSU at Ingram School, Justin F. Jefferson School. I could see that one happening. But I'd say round 5, 6, or 7 that one of the picks is an offensive guard or a center. All right, the last one, not Vikings themed, but certainly applies to the team and their life in general. I think by the time the draft is over, you look at the haul by the Detroit Lions and you're like, good God, that's really sweet. What do they have? The 16th, 18th, 40-something, and 55th pick? They've got 4 picks within the top 55. And by the time the draft is kaput and you're looking at all of the results and people are getting their grades out there, you can certainly grade a draft class. You don't have to see any football being played. Go ahead and put your grade on it. I think you're going to be scared of the Lions draft class on top of the anxiety that you already have about them probably being good. And I'm talking like probably big name recognition because they have the 6th pick and the 18th pick, like a Jalen Carter, Bijan Robinson. You're going to be familiar with a lot of their picks because as a draft person, presumably watching a show like this, you've studied all of these names. And because the Lions have 4 picks in the top 60, you're going to know all the guys they drafted. And anytime a draft pick is chosen for the rest of the spring and summer, they're infallible. They can do no wrong. And then the football games start and about half of them work out. I digress. But for the spring and summer sake, you're going to look down at the Lions' already improving roster, see this draft class, and think, ay caramba. All right, tomorrow I will be back with Josh Fry. He is doing his predictive mock draft. He's going to tell you what will happen. Last week he told you what they should do. And then I think, Thursday, I got about 2 or 3 podcasts to do, but I might be back in time for my predictive mock draft. I already told you about Breesy, but there'll be other dudes join the team. I hope you enjoyed the show. 7 Vikings draft predictions, and of course, if I am way off base and last year was an anomaly when I got everything right, I'll be tripping, and you could tell me, get your shit together. All right, Skol, baby.